Today we're going to talk about the Stratus ztC Edge, the new product, the new generation that's been released and is available for order. And I want to just give a background before we get into the products, give a bit of a background on what is Edge. I think we've got a few people on the call here that might not be familiar with what is the Edge, what does it mean, what is Edge computing. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of that. Right, so what is Edge? Many companies today are distributing and not centralizing their headquarter functions. They have branch offices and other remote locations, but they're all connected with local area and wide area networks, including the internet. All right, so when we talk about the Edge, we're really referring to the Edge as the edge of corporate networks. All right, so anything outside a data center, outside a control room, or control room might be even part of the Edge, but anything that's really close to your application or close to your distribution network. All right, so what is edge computing? Edge computing, it takes place at the edge of these corporate networks. It is computing that takes place at remote plants or at a branch office or some or other distributed location for that matter. It is not computing that takes place in a traditional data center or in a cloud, as some of us might know even that. So it's really taking that computing power and sort of pushing it right down to your branches or to your local sites. All right, so computing at the edge of corporate networks, not data center and not the cloud. So the question I think everybody asks is why the interest in edge computing? It starts with the growing availability of internet-connected services and the data they produce. So companies are discovering how data generated from these devices can be used to analyze businesses, processes, and be in a competitive advantage. So really, it really turns out that many of these devices are at the edge locations. And because of bandwidth constraints, latency, and relative high costs of edge networks, practically speaking, data analysis will be taking place at the edge of these locations. And we need these computing power in order to do all these data analytics and reporting and bringing all these data together in order to manipulate, calculate, and process all these data, and then maybe send it into a cloud environment. All right, so it's really Gartner predicts that really by the year 2022, due to growing competitive pressures and the growing value of real-time insight, that more than half of all IoT analytics will be done at the edge. Right, so that's really a good thing, maybe also not a good thing, but really that we need to provide that power at the edge. Now, the problem of having computing power at the edge is it's sometimes hard places to get with limited access, places that lack bandwidth and have limited resources. If there are any people there at all, maybe, to maintain these sort of hardware infrastructure. So who's going to make sure that these computers and these remote edge locations continue to function as intended? All right, so who's going to operate them, update them, and fix them if they break? All right, so that's really the problem that we're sitting with at the edge. Now that is where Stratus comes in. All right, so who is Stratus? We deliver zero-touch computing at factory talk or factory analytics, edge computing infrastructure that is simple and easy to deploy. It's really protected from all threats and interruptions, and it runs autonomous. Right, these machines look after themselves with little to none intervention. So, and it will really alert Stratus if we need to sort of intervene and maybe look at some problems that might occur. But in 99% of these cases, these machines look after themselves. So as you can see on the screens, we've been around for 41 years. We really focus in the high availability market. That's sort of our aim, is to provide high availability infrastructure to protect a world. So if it's anything to do with financial, health, or even lives that is at stake, we need to protect it with a proper server infrastructure. All right, so we are really available, or our machines can be used in all spheres of industries, from factory automation to medical to mobility, mobile, sort of to the cloud even, we can actually use these infrastructures. So we'll talk a bit more on our products. I'm not going to handle today the FT server because the focus is more on the new ztC generation 2, as you can see on the little picture on the side. And I will later on show you actually a real live view of the new ztC 200 series. Right, one thing just to note and to emphasize is the fact that at Stratus, we guarantee 5 nines of availability. So what does that mean? Availability is measured in nines, right? So anything above a certain amount of nines, or the better in the nines, the better your solution. Now, if you look at it on the screen, a typical non-redundant computer will supply you or will give you about 99.5% of availability. That's normal PC or laptop or anything in that case. If you go into a more cluster scenario where you would have multiple hosts with central storage or external storage, that can give you up to 4 nines of availability. At Stratus, we will guarantee you 5 nines of availability. We have a unique way of doing things. We might sound arrogant, but we really can put our money where our mouth is. We have a uptime meter, as you can see on the right-hand bottom corner. That's an uptime meter that is published live on our website. So that uptime meter is linked to all our global production systems globally. So if any of those systems get affected or are down due to hardware failure and is not running, then that uptime meter gets affected. Currently, I think I looked this morning, we are setting anything between 6 and 7 nines of availability. Now, if you are good in maths and good in calculations, that equates to around about 3.15 seconds of possible hardware downtime that you might have per year. Now, 3.15 seconds is hardly anything. So just imagine if you have a production environment and you are down for half an hour or an hour, how much production loss, how much money you actually lose because of that hardware downtime. So that's really where Stratus is unique in what we do and how we do things to keep applications continuously running. All right, so the Stratus value proposition. First of all, simple. To deploy, manage our system is very easy. To maintain it is very easy. We try to make it as simple as possible, so with very little to none intervention. All right, the next one is protected from harsh environments, hardware failures, cyber attacks. You will see with the ztC Edge that even one is behind me, they are rugged. All right, there's no moving parts in it. There's no fans that can suck in dust and cause failures because, you know, electronics and dust doesn't sort of gel together, but really they are ruggedized and really made for industrial purposes and for very harsh environments. It's not to say that you have to use ztC in an industrial environment. It can be used anywhere. You do not have to have a server cabinet in order to install these ztC systems. And then lastly, autonomous, right? The ztC as well as the FT server product takes care of itself. It monitors a lot of inputs on the ztC as well as the FT server, and it will take action. There's a whole predictive model that runs in these products, and it will take action before something happens. It will either alert us or try and fix itself. If it cannot get to a point where it can fix itself, it will then send an alert to Stratus if we are monitoring the system in order to then remotely try and connect and see what is the problem, if we can easily fix it. If not, we will send a new part. And that's also where the sort of simplicity comes in, whereby you do not need IT skills in order to change that system. I mean, if it's a ztC system like you can see here behind me, it's a matter of just removing one node, taking the faulty one out, putting a new one in and plugging the cables in, and you can turn around and walk away. You do not have to even access or open a web page or do anything. That it will automatically pick up the new node and it will automatically sync with its existing partner that's still working. Right. The big thing with Stratus is our vision is really to create edge solutions to simplify and protect a connected world. That is our #1 vision. Our mission really is to be the partner of choice for digital transformation by delivering zero-touch edge computing. We want to be your partner going forward to be able to supply you with these zero-touch computing infrastructure to make it simple and easy to deploy these systems. Now, of course, with all computer infrastructures, there's always challenges involved. But I think that's one thing that Stratus are very focused on, is to try and make it as simple as possible. So faster, better, cheaper, that is our motto. All right, so we want to try and give you the best solution for the best price, but also make it easy to deploy, easy to set up, and easy to get going in. But now, of course, having these ztC infrastructure machines that you see behind me, because they are deployed at the edge, that's sort of where more and more technology is deployed these days. But now, of course, IT skills and the know-how to be able to maintain and operate these server infrastructure gets lesser. That's why we have to focus on making it as simple as possible. Now, that's also really where the IT and OT people needs to work together. From an industrial perspective, OT, right? Sometimes that's sort of the swear word. The OT guys does not want to work with the IT guys, but we are entering a digital world, right? And unfortunately, that is inevitable. We will need to be working together with IT guys, the OT guys as well, to be able to create these connected enterprise systems in order to move forward. Take all the data that's being calculated and being gathered at the edge and move it in via the IT infrastructure into the cloud or into the office space or into a central location for that matter. All right, that's sort of just a background and a bit of overview of Stratus and what is edge computing. Now for the good part. So Stratus has a few years back decided to go into the edge market with our generation 1 ztC. This is the ones that you see behind me. This is our ztC 110 and our ztC 100i series. And it's been going great, and it's been making people's life much more easier, being having a powerful device at the edge, but also deployed very simply. Right. So we have recently announced that our generation 2 ztC model, which even got more power and more flexibility than what our first generation had. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about. On the little picture that you see in front of you, on the left-hand side is the new ztC 200, and on the right-hand side is our ztC 250i. Right, those are the two ones, and we'll go a bit into deeper depth into this. Right, so the ztC is different. So we think the reason for its widespread interest is that that is unlike any other alternative companies might consider it for reliability and secure edge computing infrastructure. So when companies think about edge computing, it's not unusual to start off with a simple workstation or even a rack mount server, since that is what they usually see in data centers. Right, but really, and if workstations sort of break down too often, they might consider them using like industrial PCs because that's more rugged, all right, and can function in very hot and dusty environments. But unlike commodity of the shelf computers, ztC Edge is rugged, can withstand harsh factory conditions. Unlike industrial PCs, ztC Edge provides a built-in virtualized platform and is a server-based. It is not a industrial PC, right? Although it sort of looks like it and it's really rugged, the same way it is really a server in an industrial form factor. So if we look at the ztC stands for zero touch computing. We're almost there. It takes you about less than 30 minutes to set up actually a dual node system, even lesser time to set up a single node system. So that is what ztC stands for, zero touch computing. ztC Edge requires less resources to deploy, operate, and maintain. Right, highly available edge computing infrastructure, specifically designed for edge computing workloads. It is secure, it is rugged, and very highly autonomous. Right, so it will look after itself. And then, of course, there's also a bunch of services. Sorry, just want to go one back. There's also a bunch of reliable sort of applications and services that goes around the ztC. So you can see there is virtualization. We have security, interoperability, manageability, redundancy, protection, serviceability, and then the service itself. So we'll go a bit into a little bit more detail on each of these entities. So first of all, built-in virtualization. The ztC consists of a built-in virtualized platform, so no need to actually go and purchase a virtualized license like VMware or Microsoft Hyper-V or even Linux for that matter. It is a Linux-based sort of virtualized or CentOS-based base system that has got a built-in virtualized layer as well as a high availability layer, and we'll touch on the high availability later, a little bit later. So you can really, by taking it out of the box, 5 to 6 minutes later, you are ready to deploy your first virtual environment, your first base operating system, which could be Windows or Linux, right? The virtual environment are also capable of importing OVF and OVA format virtual machines. So virtual machines that's been created with a VMware infrastructure. Of course, there's a whole bunch of tools out there to be able to easily convert from one virtualized platform to another. And then, of course, we also support both BIOS and UV boot. There you can see a Windows screenshot of the built-in virtualization web interface. So everything gets done through this web interface. You set up the ztC, configure the ztC, you import your virtual machines if need be, or create your virtual machines if need be, set up your CPU, memory, and network connections. Everything is done via a web interface. So no need to install additional software to be able to maintain and configure it. With regards to simplified security, the ztC consists of a host-based firewall. So you can really blacklist and whitelist IP addresses. You can restrict the USB ports on it. You can really do a lot of security because these devices are deployed at the edge. So you need to have the security in place. You can prevent people from just plugging in a memory stick and be able to detect it. So all these things can be really done up front in order to protect your ztC system at the edge. Then interoperability. All right, so the ztC supports SNMP support. It also supports OPC UA. So maybe you are familiar with that because that's more from an industrial automation perspective. OPC UA stands for Open Communication Protocol. Right, and then for the guys that can do a bit more coding, there's also the REST API scenario where we will be able to integrate the ztC sort of variables and monitoring functions into these environments. There you can see a picture of a REST API function, which is a bit of coding, but you can really import it or create a connection to your existing software. There, from an industrial perspective, there is some pictures that comes up where we have actually integrated into the industrial environment, where we built a HMI graphic interface, and you can monitor the ztC, the IP addresses, the sort of functions, the network, the state of the ztC, all from an operator display. So you can sort of enable your operator in order to monitor your server infrastructure as well. Then OT maintainable and manageable. There's a whole bunch of capability with regards to thresholds and alerts. You can set up thresholds when your CPU threshold has been reached. You can send alerts. You can manage your VMs from the interface. You can do audit control. All the alerts can be emailed to you. Of course, if you allow Stratus to monitor it as well, so you will be able to see and pick up if there's anything that's not 100% correctly. Maybe a simple example, for instance, is bad sectors on a hard drive. So we have thresholds in place on those bad sectors. So if it reaches the highest threshold of bad sectors, it does not mean the hard drive has failed, but we know it is at risk. So we will actually replace that node where that threshold has been reached in order to prevent the application from going down. That is when you deploy a dual node system. Right there, you can see a picture or a screenshot of the web interface where you can really monitor the CPU, the memory, as well as the storage utilization of all these applications inside your virtual environment. Right, redundant deployment, very, very important. When we created a Stratus the ztC Edge, that was the first time that we actually deviated from a high availability system or a fault tolerant system. What I mean by this is that the ztC can be deployed as a single node system or as a dual node system, as you see here behind me. Right, so if you have a single node system, which means that you are at risk, if that system goes down, then all your applications or your virtual environment running on there would be able then to go down, and you would lose your information or you would lose visibility of that applications on a ztC. And that's the reason why you can easily deploy a second node. So on the PowerPoint screen that you see there, it's really as easy as a few steps, and within 10 minutes, you can easily deploy from a single node system. If you originally had a single node system and you decide to say, okay, well, high availability is a very important factor for me. Let's go and purchase a second node. It's a matter of plugging in the cables onto the second node. As you can see here, there's a little blue and yellow cable. You plug it in, you power on the second node, and the first node will automatically pick up the second node. And then there is a small little configuration wizard inside the web interface, which would let you be able to add then the second node as a redundant node. And all this happens while your application is still continue to control your business or do your functions inside your organization. You do not have to shut down the existing or running node at any time. Once you add the second node, it will automatically synchronize with the running node, and all your data will be then available in a high availability platform. So if the node fails, then everything will just continue running. If it's in fault-tolerant mode, it will just continue running. If it's in high availability mode, it will then restart on the second node. So really, I think this is a unique function of getting from single node to a dual node system without any downtime at all. Now, maybe I've just now said about high availability or fault-tolerant. Just to explain that, on the screen you will see two sort of graphs. The top one is high availability, and the bottom one is fault-tolerant. This is very important to understand the difference, because this is the capability what is available on our FT server as well as on the ztC. So in a high availability system on the top, if a host fails or a node fails, then all your application will then restart on the second node. That is that red flat line that you will see. That's sort of depending on how long your applications take to start up, because remember, your operating system needs to start up as well as your applications. So that can take anything from 3 minutes to 15, 20 minutes to get fully running on the second node. Now, for some customers, that is okay, but some customers cannot afford that even a minute of downtime. And that's where the bottom graph comes in, where we have fault tolerant. A fault tolerant system is when you see that black dotted line as where you have a failure. When you have the failure, then the applications will not restart. It will just continue to run on the second node without any downtime or without any failure or restart. So that is the highest form of availability that you will get. And that is available even on our ztC Edge system. It's stock standard on our FT server product, but you have a choice between HA or FT on our ztC Edge systems. Right, so looking at a redundant scenario, how does it look from a ztC perspective? You have the two nodes, which is linked with this blue and yellow cable that you can see here. And then, of course, you have the virtualization platform as well as the availability layer. That's already installed. There's no configuration needed. It's a matter of really plugging in the second node, and there's a wizard with a few steps that you would be able to go and click and be able to then add the second node without any downtime. And then, of course, you are running your applications in your Windows environment or Linux environment on top of this virtualized platform. The ztC, however, is limited to around about 4 to 5 virtual machines, unlike the FT server, which is a much modular system, which you can add more memory, you can add more storage, you can go to a bigger model if CPU resources are not sufficient enough. But the ztCs are fixed with the amount of CPUs, memory, and storage that is available. So you cannot upgrade them, and therefore we are allowing around about 4 to 5 virtual machines. Right. So really, from a protection point of view, the data replication, if you have a high availability system, there's no data loss. Right, your data keeps on running. You can still read and write to your hard drives. Everything will still be automatically synced up. If a problem occurs where, for instance, I will pull out a network cable, you lose a network cable, it will then automatically use the network resources on the second node and then migrate the virtual machines across in a live format to be able to run on this, and it will take the faulty one then out of production until we can fix it or repair it or replace it for that matter. And then the last point there is local site recovery. What is very unique and nice about the ztC Edge is the fact that you do not have to install these two nodes at the same space or same cabinet. Because they are interconnected with a 10 gig network cable, you can situate the two nodes in separate buildings, in separate rooms. We have installations here in South Africa where these two nodes are about 2.5 kilometers apart. So they have a fiber connection. So they use copper to fiber converters, and they have a fiber connection between the two ztC nodes. So as long as you stick to the latency rules, or what we call round trip time, as you can see on the screen, 10 milliseconds for high availability and 2 milliseconds for fault tolerant, then all is good. We can have these ztCs in different spaces. Then really field service serviceability. You do not need specialized skills. I mean, if someone can pull out the cables, the power cable, and we will send a new node and puts the new node down and plugs the cables back in again. The cables are even color-coded in blue and yellow, with the ports also in blue and yellow. So that's the skills that you require. They can plug in the cables, that's all you need. That's how easy it is to replace a node. So from a maintainable point of view, very easy to do that. And then once your new node is in place, or the replacement node is in place, it will then automatically synchronize from the existing one to the new node that's been added. Right. That's sort of the hardware scenario. Coming back to the service level or the service model in place. Again, it's a part of the side is that we monitor it, and that's an option that, or an additional option that you can take on the ztC. You do not have to take it, but it's very viable if you take the option of 24/7 monitoring, which will allow us then to monitor the system and even phone you before you even know that there's something wrong. So that's very important to have that in place. Now, because these devices are being installed at the edge, we know that sometimes there are problems and issues that there is no internet connectivity. So that is also taken care of, whereby you can actually create internal email alerts, which then the guys can then let us know what is the fault codes and fault alerts, so that we can then react on whatever needs to be done. Right, so from a really Stratus active service architecture, we do the system monitoring, we do the system diagnostics, so we can run the diagnostic on it. It's got the call home functionality, the automated part replacement. So if we pick up that there's something fault, we will automatically send a new part to the customer. That's part of the service level agreement that the customer has got in place on a yearly basis. And then, of course, as long as he's got that reoccurring service in place, we will take care of the hardware. And then we automatically replace the faulty unit if need be. So there you can see on the ztC side, it's a bit different on the FT server side, but the ztC has got a base system support. That's the one on top. And then it has got a system health add-ons. So these are add-ons like 24/7, 365 web support, advanced part exchange, which is the fact that if something goes wrong, we will send a part without questions asked. If you do not have that in place, then a warranty kicks in, and we have to do a warranty assessment, and that can take days in order to change something if something is wrong. And then the proactive monitoring and alert triage is an additional option, which then connects the ztC to the Stratus system in order to monitor it and check it out. And then we have media retention. Media retention is also an add-on. If there is very security information, especially in the defense scenario, if something fails, then you would be able to keep the disks, and you do not have to send it back to Stratus. Right, and then on the ztC really lifecycle scenario, 10 plus years. All right, so as long as the customer has got this service level agreement in place with Stratus, which is a reoccurring cost per year, we will take care of the hardware. We will make sure that the customer has got hardware for 10 plus years. When we release a new generation, we have also options in order to update the system in that case. Sorry, I can't see my screen. Can someone just indicate me if you can still see me?
No, Albertus, your video feed disappeared, but you can still see the slides. So you can finish the presentation, then just fix. Oh, there's the video feedback.
Okay, 100%. Sorry, I just heard a click and no, my camera went off. All right, 100%. All right, so let's sort of give you an overview of the ztC itself. So I first want to just sort of go back to the ztC H generation 1 overview. On the screen, you can see the 100 and the 110. Now, the one behind me here is the 110 ztC H system. That's the sort of the bigger one of the two models. Now, looking at the specifications of it, the ztC 100 consisted of 4 hyper-threaded cores, which will give you 8 virtual processors, 32 gig memory, and 512 gig of storage, whereby the ztC 110 has got 12 virtual processors of 6 hyper-threaded cores, 64 gig of memory, and then a 2 terabyte SSD or storage. There's also a difference in the amount of network ports available. On the 100i, you only have 2, and on the 110, you have 4. I want to mention this because you will see the difference, and there is a slide that shows the comparison and what's the sort of difference between the generation 1 and the generation 2 ztC. And then of course, these are all hardened. They are ruggedized. You can see their temperatures can be handled from 9 to 36 volts. They're running at a very low voltage. They use about 60 watt of power consumption per node, and that's running with all the virtual machines. If you have only one virtual machine, it will actually use less power to be able to run that virtual machine. And then, of course, ruggedized, it can be DIN rail mounted, as you can see the one behind me, or you can have table mounted, as you can see on the ztC 200 series, where you can just put it on the table. There's also a wall mount bracket where you can mount it directly on a wall. And then, of course, from an operating system support, we support both Windows as well as Linux. And we've also even run Ubuntu virtual machine on it as well with no problems. But now the difference, and that's where we sort of come back into the slide of HA versus FT, or high availability versus fault tolerant. The ztC 100s can only do high availability. So which means that if a node fails in a high availability platform or configuration, then your virtual environment will then restart on the remaining node that's still healthy. Right, so that's where that restart or that red flat line that you saw on one of the slides comes into play. But the ztC 110, you have the ability to configure your virtual environment either to run in high availability mode or fault tolerant mode. Now, fault tolerant mode uses a bit more processing capacity or processing power, so it sort of adds an additional 2 virtual processors to that virtual machine. But in that scenario is that if a node fails, then you will not have any fault or any problems on the remaining side. It will just continue running your application on the remaining node. Right, that's sort of just a quick brief background of our ztC 1 generation. I don't want to keep dwell too much on them because what I want to sort of tell you about is the new generation 1 today, and that is the ztC 200 and the ztC 250i nodes. Right, so on the screen here, you can see that the difference between the 200i and the 250i. First of all, the processing power has been increased in both these ztC options from our generation 1. Memory, still the same between the ztC 200 and versus the 250i. Again, the storage also has been increased. If you can remember the previous slide, on the 100i, we had 512 gig of storage. Now that has been increased to 1 terabyte on the smallest ztC platform, which is the 200i. And then we've also added an additional 2 network ports on the smaller model 200i machine. Again, you can see the difference between in the form factor between the two. This is old generation versus the new generation, a bit more square, a bit more compact, also lighter in weight. So really much difference in sort of the form factor as well. Now, this is where the sort of great thing about the deployment goes in, and I want to show you these slides. So when you purchase a ztC out of the box, and you take your node out of the box, you put it on the table, you power it on, you plug a screen and a keyboard on, there's a little pamphlet, I think we've got 6 steps that will actually tell you it's through the steps, almost like installing a printer driver, where it will tell you, go, okay, step number 2, switch on the ztC node. Step 3, follow the on-screen instructions. On the screen, it will tell you, do you want to deploy the node? And you press enter, and it will then go on and start deploying the node. It will ask you a few questions about language and to actually assign an IP address to that node, because each node needs its own IP address. And then once that IP address has been allocated, the node, a few minutes later, I've actually timed it, it's around about 5 to 6 minutes later, then on the screen, it will tell you to go to a web interface or a web browser like Chrome or Internet Explorer or Firefox, type in the IP address that you've just allocated to the ztC, and then enter it. And then it will bring you to the web interface logon screen. And from there, you can then now start configuring the final configuration, licensing your machine. There's a EULA that you have to accept and then license it, and then start adding your virtual machine or virtual environment. Now, we've now just deployed a single node. Now we want to actually add a second node to the system. So first of all, make sure that your existing node is running, it's healthy, the little system LED that's on it. You can see that I'm pointing to it here on the screen. If that is flashing, we know your existing node is all up and running and all okay. Right, then you would go and take your second node that you've purchased. You go and plug in all the cables. That means the blue and the yellow cable, as well as your network cable, and then your power button, and power it on. Once you've powered it on, you can now go back to your web interface, original web interface, and under the Preferences tab, there is actually a option called Availability, whereby you would then see, as you see on the screen, there is it's already detected the one node is running, but there's an option now to click on the little green plus sign to be able to go and add the second node. This will take you through a few steps. It will first of all start scanning and pick up the second node with the serial number and everything. Once that is done, then that's it. Your ztC second node has been just configured and added. Now you can go to your network information or network preferences tab and just go and assign an IP address to that second node. Okay, once that is done, that's it. Your system is now running in a high availability scenario. And then once it's actually deployed, you'll see a nice green tick, which will tell you that your nodes are synchronized and all is now running what we call a duplex mode. Right, so the differences, the main differences. Now, first of all, we look at the ztC 100 versus the ztC 200i, but they are in the same sort of smaller model class. So everything in red is the differences. All right, so you can see from processing perspective, it went up from 4 hyper-threaded cores to 6. The memory stays exactly the same, but the memory is now ECC memory, so it's much higher performance in memory side. And then our storage capacity has been increased from 512 gig to 1 terabyte. But it's also now the new NVMe technologies, which is much higher performance drives than the SSD or standard SSD that you will get. Right, and then we've added an additional 2 network ports on the ztC 200i, which the 100i only had 2. So now you have in total 4 business ports to be able to work with. That's not including the blue and the yellow cable or the synchronization ports, or what we call A-links between the 2 nodes if you deploy a redundant system. And then size, different, as well as the weight, it's much lighter now as well. We look at the ztC 110 versus the ztC 250i. Again, it's been increased from 6 hyper-threaded cores to 10 hyper-threaded cores, which will give you a total of 20 virtual processors that you can work with and assign to your virtual environment. Memory is the same, but again, we now have the ECC memory, which is much better in performance, as well as the storage capacity is the same, but it is now the NVMe technology. And then the power capacity, where the ztC 110 was fixed at 24 volts, now you can actually run from 9 to 36 volts. So even if your power drops to 9 volts, your virtual environment will still keep on running and continue to control your application. Right, and then of course, again, the weight is much different. So that's sort of a quick overview of the hardware. Lastly, I want to just touch on what we call the ztC advisor. So what is the ztC advisor? If you have an application or a customer that are deploying multiple of these ztC systems, that is where the ztC advisor comes into play, because the ztC advisor is an additional entity or license that you can acquire, which will allow you to monitor multiple ztC systems from a central web interface or a central portal. So there you can see, because there's a growing market and maybe you have a business that continues to have multiple of these install base, you really want to access all of them at the same time and not go and type in the IP address of a single node system and go to that specific install base. But you really want to have a good overview of all your installations. And that is where the advisor comes in. So it's a very nice, usable and user-friendly web interface. You can create groups for your ztC installs and then be able to actually drill down into your ztC if you see a problem in a quick overview screen on your web interface. I just want to touch on nice development tools. We are continuously trying to make things better and easier for customers. We've developed sizing guides. We have alliance partners like Rockwell Automation, Aviva, Inductive Automation, GE. We also have a generic sizing guide, which is not application specific. You can put all your own application names in there and select your own resources. And these sizing guides will assist you to be able to then calculate the resources that you require. If it's sufficient to run on a ztC system, or do you require maybe a much larger scalable system like the FT server product? So these tools are available on our partner portal, as well as on our websites, to be able to assist you and make it easy for you. So, for example, if you do a Rockwell automation application, the software is embedded in this sizing tool. So it's a matter of a drop-down list where you go and select the software, and it will automatically fill in the resource requirement for that software application that you've just chosen. So that really makes your life much easier. If there's maybe specific ones that you guys want, we can always consider and have a look at, and maybe trying to create additional sizing guides. We are not the experts in all these applications, so that's where our partner sort of comes into play and sort of needs to help us create these tools. And then we have also OPC guides for the industrial environment, which will be able to allow you to sort of give you a step-by-step instruction of how to integrate the ztC monitoring and variables to be able to be monitored in an operator environment. So there you can see that is the OPC integration screens and how it looks like. I could show a picture previously. So lastly, why Stratus? All right, first of all, Stratus supplies fault-tolerant systems. We make computing, edge computing very easy. We can customize solutions to your need. We have a few different product offerings from our FT server in the left top corner. The one below is the Everrun software. That is a software that emulates a high availability scenario on existing hardware. So not Stratus hardware, on existing hardware. It could be any hardware. If you have two hosts, you can deploy, and they are exactly the same. You can deploy an Everrun software and create the same high availability scenario as with the ztC. The ztC is actually running the Everrun software on top of our hardware platform, so we can then guarantee the performance with the software. It's always a bit of a toss-up if you deploy our software on a third-party hardware, because we do not know the hardware, so we cannot always guarantee the performance. And that's sort of where sometimes a little bit of issues creeps in. And then, of course, the ztC product that we have. And then we also have a product called V-Series, but that's a bit more application specific. That's not something that we really do here in South Africa. So really, FT Server, ztC Edge, and Everrun software is the product that we can promote and can help you with. So really scalable. We can really protect your systems on your applications from the edge right up to the cloud environment. So edge computing product strategy. Simple, protected, and autonomous. That is what Stratus is all about. We know it's always difficult to deploy server infrastructure, but with Stratus, we're trying to make it as simple as possible, but yet we still do the protect side of it as well as the autonomous side of it. So we will monitor, the server takes care of itself. If you allow it, it will take care of itself. It will even monitor the environment around the server to be able to make sure that maybe all other devices that's in the same environment as the server are also protected. Over the past few years, we've really received a whole bunch of awards. Part of the year, you can go on our website, it's a whole bunch of them, specifically on the ztC Edge, that is a unique product and it's one of its kind. And it's really been claiming all the awards with regards to the product simplicity, how easy it is to deploy, and the performance as well as the reliability of the product itself. Our last, but a really big award was the North American Company of the Year we received for 2021. That's really deploying a fault tolerance system or reliability system in less than 30 minutes. So that's really a unique scenario. Really use cases, I mean, I'm starting with the automation platform. You can deploy these really because they are ruggedized in an industrial environment. You can deploy them in security. We have companies that actually use them to monitor the security. If you have a fingerprint reader or an access card reader and you want to enter a building, behind that could be a ztC that controls and protects your actual environment with using the ztC Edge. There's a whole bunch of customers. There's plenty more, which I can't get all of them on the slide, but customers that are currently using our products. Some of our big customers like our banking industry. I think our customer that has got the most install base in South Africa is Disking Pharmacies. So they are really pushing up the numbers with regards to the FT server side. There are more than over 180 servers already install base across South Africa. And then really from industrial to security, Gallagher is a security company, and that's where the sort of security side comes in play. And then globally, there's really, I think we can give you a lot of use cases. You can see a whole bunch of these logos from customers that are already using our products. It might be FT server, it might be a ztC. Right, so just to sort of close off, that's really what I wanted to get across to you today, is really the new ztC Edge. There you can see it, there's the new ztC in a closer view. This is a redundancy or a fault tolerance setup, but you can also deploy just a single node scenario and just have one node running. You will be at risk if that node fails. Then your virtualized environment running on it will then, of course, go down as well. But if you deploy a dual node system like this, then you are really protected with a 5 nines of availability factor.